everyone. I'm here today with my friend Monica. We are going to be talking about the trauma that results from sexual assault. And I'm really excited for Monica to be here to share her story. It's extremely powerful, and to share everything that she's really learned about God, about relationships, and all the things that have come from this trauma. And so, Mon, do you mind just kind of starting us off with a little bit of your background and what exactly happened?
Yeah, for sure. So I just want to preface this by saying that my story, I think everybody's story when it comes to sexual abuse, sexual assault is very different. And I think it's so important as we listen and hear stories of people who have overcome that, gone through that, to really identify that, to understand that your story is different. My hope is that through sharing mine, that there are pieces of yours that connect if you're listening, if you've dealt with that, if you're loving someone through this, but also to recognize that mine is really unique in the sense that most people have experienced sexual abuse in their childhood, and mine was in full-blown adulthood. So it was a little bit different than most people. I grew up in a really awesome home, God-fearing home. By the time I went to college, I had one boyfriend. We had only kissed. I was saving myself till marriage. That was a big deal for me and something that I really was passionate about. We'll get into this, but my theology behind that was really just about the church told me not to have sex, so I wasn't going to do it. That was kind of why I chose not to. Got to college, had an awesome college experience. I ran in college, didn't date a lot. And in my master's in college, I started dating this guy, and we were in a pretty serious relationship. I would say it's, if you're out there and you're a believer, or if you subscribe to the theology, like when you know, all of those things kind of align for me. And I was 22 at this point, and we were pretty serious. We had been dating for about 6 months and talked about marriage. And I really felt like this was the person I was going to spend my life with. He wanted to go into ministry full time, and that is what I wanted to do as well. And so everything was kind of falling into place. And one day, out of the blue, he comes to my office at work and says, "Hey, I'm gonna go." And I was like, "Go where?" And he's like, "I'm gonna go. I really need to get away, and I'm so sorry, but I can't do this with you." And at first I thought no big deal, because I was so confident about our relationship that I thought nothing bad would happen. But what resulted was he actually dropped out of school, changed his number, moved, completely fell off the face of the earth. Everyone that knew him, all of our friends, he was gone. And the initial trauma I went through was the trauma of rejection that many of us are familiar with and know, but I didn't recognize or know that I was actually facing rejection in that moment. I lived in an apartment in downtown Dallas, close to downtown area, with some girlfriends. One of my roommates loves a good time. She's a good time girl, still is to this day, love her to death. And I was depressed. I can confidently say that looking back. I didn't know that at the time. I think she saw that, and the best way she could, extended a hand to me and said, "Why don't you come out and party with me?" And I'm 22, had never been drunk, had hardly drank. I decide I'm going to go out with her one night, and I get all dressed up, and I'm a dark-skinned Latina. There are light-skinned ones. I'm dark. So I was super tan. It was summertime, and we go out, and basically night after night, I start numbing the pain of this rejection through alcohol. And when I would go out, guys would hit on me, buy me drinks. They liked me. And I'm going to be honest, some of you might resonate with this. I felt invincible in that season. I felt like nothing can stop me. I can push the limits as hard as I want, and I'm never going to get hurt. I would make out with guys in bars, but I was like, that's the most I'll do. I'll never cross the line. And probably about 2 months of this, it was an extended period of time of me consistently partying, numbing my rejection, and not having the awareness to know what I was doing. I was so deep in my pain that I was out one night with a group of girlfriends, and I fully believe I was drugged that night. And I remember being at the bar, and the next thing I remember is waking up, coming to consciousness on this guy's bed. And I can't tell you his name to this day. I don't know it. I didn't know it that night. And he was literally taking my clothes off when I came to consciousness. And I remember telling him instantly, please stop. I'm a virgin. I don't want to do this. And it was one of the darkest moments of my life. Like you block out a lot of things in trauma, but what I do remember is him laughing in my face and being like he didn't care that I was a virgin, that I didn't want to do this, none of that. And I remember like calling out for someone to help me. And he was like, we're alone. There's no one home. Like, you're by yourself. Your friends left you. Like, just speaking lies to me in the moment. And eventually I stopped fighting him and was like, what am I going to do? Like, I'm by myself and there's nothing that I can do to stop this. And so he raped me that night. And this was like, I'm 32. I was 22. This is 10 years ago. So we're talking, 2010, 2011, this is pre-Uber, this is pre like cell phones having the capacity to like do things that they do now. And I didn't have my phone. I didn't have my wallet. I had no way to get home and I had no idea where I was at. It was one of the scariest feelings of my life. And so I had to stay the night at his place. And I just remember that night lasted for an eternity. And the next morning he took me home and it really was evil. And I think this is something that's so important to recognize, is that whoever your abuser is, they're not in a healthy mind state. And they're probably not, they're probably not acting out of good in that moment. Let's just say, I'm going to say for a fact, they're not acting in a good manner. And that whole ride, he was telling me like, yeah, your friends left you. They didn't care about you. Like, yeah, you were all alone. And he just minimized the entire situation. And I remember I got back to my apartment. A couple of the girls I lived with had gone out with me the night before. And I remember standing in front of the apartment door and looking at it and having this inner dialogue with myself. And I said to myself, this is your fault. Like, you put yourself in this situation. You're an adult. And this happened because you made it happen. And I remember in that moment saying, I will never tell a soul about this. And walked into the apartment, totally minimized the situation to my roommates and like, what happened? Where were you? And I was like, oh, I just stayed the night with a friend, like totally made stuff up. And then for the next year and a half, probably, I went down a really dark downward spiral. And I started to agree with all of these lies about myself and partied even more, numbed with more alcohol. I eventually got into smoking a lot of weed, and like nothing was ever enough. It was like I needed more and more and more to numb the pain. And then I would find myself dating a guy, and the moment like he would want to have sex, inevitably, I was like a moth to a flame to these guys that were no good. And I would eventually sleep with them. And then the next day I would end it with them and move on to the next guy. And it was like this cycle. But I have vivid memories of like telling myself, if you can just find a decent guy and marry him, all of this will go away. Like, you won't feel dirty. You won't feel shameful. It's going to fix everything. And this entire mindset I was warped and wrapped in was wrong, like the entire time. But I had no idea what was going on until I hit like an ultimate breaking point. So, yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry. I know we've talked about this before, but like, thank you for your vulnerability, because I know that there's so many people, I relate to this. There's so many people that I know do as well. Mm-hmm. Do you mind sharing what exactly that breaking point was and how that assault really changed your entire lens and your view of the Lord and relationships and different things?
Absolutely. The breaking point happened for me. It was July 4th weekend, and it was 2012 and 2013, July 4th, weekend 2013. And July 4th fell in the middle of the week. So if you have ever partied or been in that scene, you know that if it's in the middle of the week, you party the weekend before and you party the weekend after. So it was like all these parties I was going to for July 4th weekend. And it was July, I want to say 7th or 8th. And I go out that night with friends. There were like some friends in town from my hometown. We're all out, and I'm out with one of my good girlfriends. And long story short, was roofied again. But I knew it was happening, and I knew I could recognize it. And so that friend made sure I got home safely. And the next day when I woke up, I was like, just really shook because it took me back. Like the fear, a lot of the trauma, a lot of the emotions I felt the day of that rape. Even though I was home safe that night, all of those emotions came flooding back that next day. And I remember I lived by myself in downtown Dallas area, and I sat on my couch and I just remember saying, God, if you're real, like, because my theology and view of God for that whole year and a half was that he hated me, that I was disgusting to him because I had sinned against him. And there is a difference. I think it's really important. I didn't know this at the time, but my theology was like, no sex before marriage. I had sex before marriage. I'm a sinner. I'm separated from God. He's disappointed in me. I'm never going to find a good guy. No guy's going to love me because I'm broken and used goods. Like, that was the theology I had. But I also had this view of God that because I had chose to go out and party and drink and be in that environment, that my punishment was rape. Like, that was how I viewed God. So that day I sat on my couch and I said, God, if you're real, like if you exist, I need you to talk to me. Like, I need to know you're real, because I just couldn't handle the pain any longer. And I knew that any substance wasn't going to fix it at that point. And I just felt the rush of God's presence like come over me in that space. And I heard God say to me, look up the meaning of your name. Like, I just heard those words in my spirit. And so I pull out my phone and I Google Monica. Comes from the word mono, which means one, alone, unique, only one. And I just remember in that moment breaking down and crying even more. And I hadn't let myself cry for about a year at this point. I'd kept everything in, and I was so angry because when you hide something that traumatic and you keep it bottled in and you don't say anything, it is the most lonely and isolating feeling in the world. So for the past year and a half, all I felt was alone. All I felt was like no one understood me. I felt so isolated. And so to know that my name meant alone was heart-wrenching. Like, I'd already felt like God hated me. And then I looked up the meaning and I was like, God, you must really not like me. And I'm, sitting there snot running down my face crying because I'm hurting. And I hear God say to me, no, look up your full name. And Amanda is my middle name. And I Google Amanda's meaning, and it means worthy of love. And when I tell you that, like, in that moment, I heard God say to me, like, you are worthy of my love. Like, and I've called you that. Like, that has been the name I've given you before I knew anything that would happen in my life. He said to me, you, my daughter, are worthy of my love. That's the name he had given me. And at that moment, I knew, like, okay. And I said to him that day, I said, okay, like, I had been hiding. I had been faking it. I had been trying to look like I had it all together. I had not dealt with any of the trauma and pain in my life. But in that moment, it was the first time that I can say in my life that I really had a face-to-face interaction with God, where I felt like I saw him for who he was, which was someone who loved me, didn't judge me, accepted me, desired me, and had purpose for me, for my life, And so I said it that day, I said, okay, I'm just going to choose obedience to you no matter what, which has led down an amazing journey in my life, that how we even met. But that led me down this journey as well of seeking help and professional help, counseling. I started to confess, what had been going on in my life, sharing my story more. The more you share, the more freedom there is. But it was a journey of really me untangling so many different lies and beliefs and a web of things that were I would say partly were put on me through my trauma, but also through poor theology that I believed growing up about God and that I learned in the church, unfortunately. And so those things that we'll get into really, I think, were key to unlocking freedom for me and unlocking really the ability for me to sit here and talk about this in a total different light, to know that I am made whole, that my body is a temple, that I am pure in God's eyes, that nothing that has happened against my body or that I willingly put myself into defines my purity. And that purity is so much different than having sex and not having sex, and God's definition of that and God's design of that and why he designs it that way. Those things I don't think I would have ever come to fully understand or appreciate were it not for the journey I was put on through my life experiences.
Would you mind giving us a little more insight as to what that bad theology looked like for you and how you really were able to overcome it?
One of the poor lies I believed was that God is angry with me. He doesn't like me. I'm a sinner. I sinned because through this rape, when there's a difference in when I would go out and party and get completely drunk off my butt and make stupid decisions and just be belligerent. The Bible says not to drink to drunkenness. I was willfully and knowingly sinning against God in that moment. In the moment of my rape, when someone was using their power and their definition of good and evil against me and sinning against my body, I can now say with like a clear conscience, I was not willfully partaking in that sin. Sin was done against me and on me, and the sin and the brokenness of that person affected my life. And that's what sin does. That's literally what sin does to us. It affects us even if we don't partake in it. The sin of adultery and your parents getting divorced, you didn't play any part in that, but it affects you. It has a ripple effect on you, and it bleeds into your life and can affect your upbringing and things around you. In the same way, when it comes to sexual assault and rape specifically, any sort of sexual assault done against you that is against your will, you did not willingly walk into that situation and say, I want to be a consensual party in this engagement. It's sin done against you, and it's a result of the fall of man. But you did not willfully participate. There's a difference. And I'm going to go knowing that it's a sin, go do this, versus I'm going into this situation or I'm put in this situation, this is done to me. And God views those two things very differently. God's heart, his love, his compassion, his mercy, his broken heart in that moment for you is real. And I think this is where we've talked about this because, you've been through similar experiences of rape was the first time where I really began to question who God was. Is God good? Why do bad things happen to me? Not good people, me, why would God ever allow this? I had to really unpack my theology through counseling as well, because I believed that God, allowed all of these things to happen, allowed the rejection, allowed the rape, allowed me to fall down this dark spiral. Like, it was easy for me to blame it all on God and to make it about him. But in reality, our lives and the story I read in the Bible, God gives us choices. It's all about our choice. Like, we have the power. We are powerful people. I have the power today to sit here and not be a victim to my story. Like, I have the power today. I had the power that day on the couch to choose to move forward. I had the power in that moment to say, I'm going to go to counseling. I have the power to choose to think rightly about who God says that I am. I have the power to continue to believe the truth of the power of the gospel, which makes me white as snow. Like, I have the power to believe that I'm worthy of more than what I thought I was. And so I think in the moment of your darkness, of your pain, of your poor theology, of these things that separate us from God, we tend to fall into this victim mentality naturally. And we're there because we have experienced something so difficult that's so unbearable. Honestly, it's unbearable to think of how you can get through on the other side. And it forces you to be a victim almost to God and his sovereignty. And there's a difference in being a victim here to a person, but it's a different level to be like, God, how dare you? Like, you did this, you caused this. We begin to question God's authoritative power in his design. And I think that was something that I wrestled with because God had never been bad to me, up until that breakup when that guy rejected me and the 2 years following. But I wouldn't even say God was bad to me. Man, the brokenness the reality of sin in our world, the choices that we have the power to make, your choices affect you and the people around you. And that bleeds into every area. But at 22, when that guy rejected me, I made a choice to numb that with alcohol. That series of choices did lead to me getting raped. Did God desire any of that to happen? No, he did not. I made the choice for it to happen. Does God use it for his good and my good? Yes, he does. And I'm a living, breathing, walking testimony of that. But it doesn't mean that we are powerless in our stories, and that even when something happens against us, against our will, against God's will, it means you have an opportunity to take power back in your life and choose how you will move forward and choose how you will continue to have a right view of God. And I think for anyone out there who is struggling with that, believing the lies about God's angry with you, you are a mistake, you are the problem. If your story resonates with mine, where you've made choice, you've numbed through alcohol, through drugs, through men, because I have, that was what I did. God doesn't look at you in disgust. God doesn't say you're too far gone. God doesn't think that it's impossible for you to come back from that and to be made whole and pure in his image and to adopt the purity that he designed for you to walk in. You have that opportunity. It's there for you. You have the power to make the choice, to believe it and to walk in it. It's your choice. And I think that was something, once I recognized and started to realize these things and that happened to me do not control or dictate my life. God has given me choices. What will I choose today?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people face, at least on my end, because my story was similar to yours in that I remember that moment kind of like you had in front of your apartment where I just was like telling myself, I will never tell anyone about this. And even went as far to like go to my friends and tell them that, I was with other people that night and it was a great night and everything was fine. And so as people who have experienced sexual assault and feel like for whatever reason, they feel like they can't tell anyone, do you have any advice for them or anything that the Lord's shown you as to why you shouldn't stay to yourself in silence?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand whether you're watching and you have a background in the church, you're pro-church or anti-church, whatever. I want you to remove that from your mind right now. And I want you to recognize that we were made in the Imago Dei, the image of God. We're image bearers of God. And in the beginning, this is what's helped me. This is what I'm sharing this because this mindset and what I'm sharing has really helped me in so many areas of my life, but especially when it comes to sexual abuse. We were made. I believe, I don't believe in evolution. I believe in creation. I believe that God created us as the ultimate creator. And when he made us in his image. And he put us in the garden to oversee so many different things. And he says to man, you can have anything, but don't eat from this tree, which is the knowledge of good and evil, right? And so man makes that choice, eats of that tree. And what's the first thing man does after they ate from it? They hide. Yes, they hide. So once man has knowledge that they have done, the reason why they hid is because they realized they were naked. No one told them nakedness was bad, but now they're defining in their own mind what is good and evil, and they're choosing to believe that nakedness is bad, therefore then they hide. They also hid from God because they knew they disobeyed God. So they hid. It's no surprise, and it's in our human nature to hide. From the beginning, man hid. Cain kills Abel. He hides. God says, your brother's blood cries out to me. Jacob literally steals the blessing from Esau. He goes and hides. He runs away because he knows he can't be in that presence. Man, time and time again, we see all over scripture, hides when they do something against God or when sin happens to them. And I believe that is just a natural response in our human nature. But we see in the beginning story when sin enters in the world that God says, why are you hiding? Come out. Come out of hiding, come talk to me. And God doesn't make everything right in that moment with mankind, but he does make clothing for them and garments, because he recognizes that they now have knowledge of what good and evil is, and man is defined that nakedness is evil. And so he's going to, in his compassion, clothe them. And he's going to, in his compassion, still provide for them and love them in that. And I believe with my whole heart that what happens in that moment, whenever we have had such aggressive sin happen against our bodies, that our natural inclination is to hide, not just from people, but from God. And that's our natural response to sin, but we are designed to be intimate with God. We're designed for oneness with God. God made us to be close to him in every area of our lives. And so I would just say, think of that reality if you are hiding and haven't told anybody, the first person you need to talk to is God, I would say. You need to talk to God before you go to anybody else. You need to be honest with him. You need to weep before him. You need to be frustrated with him. You need to be vulnerable with him. You need to ask, how do you feel about this? And ask him to meet you where you are and his presence to come. And I believe with full confidence, no matter where you stand in your faith, God is going to meet you where you are when you ask him to meet you where you are and you are in a low, desperate place for him. He's going to show up for you. And once that happens, no, it is not wisdom to share your story with just anybody. It's not wisdom to go up to just, if you're new to church, just to go up to a random person and tell them. That's not wisdom. Ask God for wisdom and direction on who to share it with. If there is a safe person in your sphere that you know is safe, that you trust, then share with them. Share with them what happened, and don't share over the phone. Don't share over a text. Don't share over an email. You need to sit down face to face with someone who loves you, knows you. I would encourage you, someone that loves and knows the Lord really well and intimately also, and see how they respond to you in that moment. Because when I began to share with individuals who were safe people, not one of them responded with, I can't believe you did that. You're a sinner. Like, every single one of them wept with me, responded with deep compassion, reminded me of my identity, and pushed me towards asking hard questions to get the healing I needed to move forward. And so my encouragement to those of you who feel afraid to share or who hide is to tell you it's natural to hide. It's in our human nature. We're created, like, sin came, we hide. That's how our natural response is. But I'm going to tell you that when it comes to any area of your life, when you sin, the less you hide, the more freedom you will have. Stop hiding.
What was it for you throughout this process that really helped you to heal? And what are some things that you would encourage other people to do in their healing process?
I would say really counseling is huge, and I know, like, right now we're filming this in a pandemic. And so it might be hard to find someone spiritually to mentor you and to disciple you, but I would really encourage you to seek that out if you can. If your church isn't open, sending an email to someone on staff, a female ideally, would be great for you to seek help and wisdom from, to nurture you and to mentor you. But I also had a couple of spiritual fathers in that season that just changed my life, that really helped me have a better view of men. I have an amazing father, but it was weird to talk to my father about these things because my father, his role was to protect me. It took me a few years to tell my father what had happened. My family knows, it's not a secret now, but it took longer for me to tell them. But God did provide as well some spiritual fathers that really were a safe place for me to ask questions like, how do I talk to my dad about this? How do I talk to my mom about this? And how do I not hide from everybody? And so I think really doing those things, praying, lots of journaling. And one thing that I did that I think I just feel the Lord like putting it on my heart to share this is, when I was going through counseling, this wasn't an activity my counselor gave me, but it was something I just remember waking up on a Saturday morning and feeling still kind of held captive. And this was about 6 months into counseling. And I felt God say to me, like, get out a blank sheet of paper, like, computer paper, and write down the year, 2012. And the year 2012 was when I was in the thick of it. Like all of the all of the mess I was in. And God said, I want you to write down everything you remember from that year. And so I did. And all I could remember was lots of partying, being drunk, guys I'd slept with, like things that were really bad. And I got to the end of the sheet of paper, like I'd written down probably 15, 20 things that I could remember. And I was tears streaming down my face. And I wrote at the end of that paper, I hate this girl, because I hated who I was. And instantly I felt God say, I loved her and I still love her. I love that girl. And I broke down, lost it. And I felt God say to me after that, I want you to go line by line and forgive yourself for every single thing that happened, because I have forgiven you. Your sins are cast as far as the east is to the west. They're out of my memory, but you're holding yourself captive to the things that you did and the things that were done against you. And so I went line by line and forgave myself. I gave that girl grace. I said to myself, you were in a dark place and I forgive you. Like that was not your heart. Like that's not who you are. Like you're forgiven. I release you from the perfection to perform and to be all of that. And so I think going through all those things, but also there's such an importance to forgive yourself and give yourself grace. Like if you messed up after your rape, like if you're watching this and you're in a low point, like, and you're like, I don't know how to get out of this, like give yourself some grace and forgive yourself. Like I talked about having the power to make your choices. Like it really does start with choosing to forgive yourself for the past and looking at that girl with deep compassion, because she was broken. Like, and if you're there right now, she is broken and she needs some grace. Like give it to her and know that God has already forgiven you for all of it. So.
Well, you have me crying because so I'm just trying to pull it together over here. Well, Mon, that was some of the most powerful words I've heard in a long time. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your story. I know that this had to impact so many of you guys as well. If you have been tuning in and you have something you'd like us to pray about, we will be sending out a little survey in an email, and please fill it out. Let us know how we can be praying for you. And thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'll see you guys later.